Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of the industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and this is an amazing episode. Yeah, that's right. We'll just have to introduce him right off the bat. You can already see Steven Sharif, creative director over at Intrepid Studios. How are you, sir?
I am very good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love watching the show. Wait for the awesome conversation we're going to have about Ashes.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. And I know we had this conversation pre-show, but in just under 2 weeks, it will have been 1 year since the very first episode. It's actually, from the date of this recording, it's 2 weeks and 1 day. This show has been around for 1 year, and that was kicked off by our first interview on May 3rd during the Kickstarter.
That is just honestly like mind-blowing. I cannot believe that it has been a year since that May 3rd interview. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was crazy. In the middle of the second day of that Kickstarter, I think we had just hit $1 million by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting at that conference table chatting with you as everyone's hair was on fire, running around, getting stuff ready, doing live streams every other day. That was a crazy time. I can't believe it was a year ago.
Mm-hmm. A year ago. It was amazing. You guys have come so far in that time. And, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Before I do, we got to also give a little bit of love to, oh my goodness, I just realized my cameras are all messed up. I'll fix that in the meantime. But Alpha Soul, who is actually in Stormslord's place right now. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good.
I set up the nameplates before I actually put the cameras together. So the layout is actually where Stormslord's was supposed to be. But it's easier.
Oh, so I'm the new Storms.
You are the new Storms.
I'm going to say, I'm in my own office, so I think I'm okay, but you never know.
All right. And Storms, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. Recovering from PAX, but it was great.
Awesome. So we have
Yeah, I got to meet Storms actually at PAX.
Yeah.
Storms, I saw you at the panel.
Absolutely. You guys impressed the heck out of my sons.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Loving it.
That is awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Where did you come from to get to PAX?
Detroit.
Oh, Detroit. Okay, so
Yeah,
a little bit of a trip.
Took 3 of my sons, cut across Canada. Had a fun road trip. It was a blast.
That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, some of the guys in the office are still recovering from PAX.
Oh my God, they were playing PUBG until like 1 o'clock in the morning. So.
The sad part is I think I got PAX Plague and I didn't even get to go. That's the worst part of this. Oh, man, it's been awful. Anyway, so let's go ahead and we're going to jump right on into our little interview. But we have a bunch of questions lined up, which I'm going to let Storms and Alpha Soul handle for this. But I have to ask, Steven, you guys showed up, PAX East, right? What was the general reception to Ashes that you saw there? Did you get any interesting feedback from any of the people?
Yeah, honestly, the reception that we received was very warm. It was very positive. First of all, we did encounter a lot of people who weren't even aware of Ashes of Creation. That's obviously one of the benefits of going to an event like PAX, is that you get to spread the word a little bit about the project. But I think what people were more astonished by was the fact that, Ashes, everything they saw and in that experience that they got to experience there was built in less than 6 months, right? We launched that Alpha Zero December 15th of last year. And I think the majority of people were just astonished by the fact that this is a game in pre-alpha and it already looks like this. Give us the time before we go to live launch. Imagine what it would look like then. We got good feedback, obviously, about our combat. I think that's a common response from people is regards to the combat. And we constantly had to remind people this is a very early look at the game. We believe in transparency. We want a community that's going to be a part of the process of development, and it's important for us to make sure that those lines of communications are open throughout the entire process. So we had to explain, we really haven't spent any time on combat, and that's during our next milestone is really focusing on that combat and It's going to be beneficial for people to be able to look back at videos of the early iterations on combat and then see how far it's come in what period of time, to really give people an understanding of the work that's being done, the massive amount of work that's being done on this project.
Right. And I know we had talked about this in the past. You've stated it in videos before that Alpha Zero has been going on, and this was mostly technical. And I know you guys, I guess, are doing a proprietary network backend. How has that testing been going? Like,
it's going pretty good, actually. So funny thing about our Alpha Zero, when we began with our projected date on December 15th, we had probably about 70-ish%, 75%, I would say, of our users that were in the Alpha Zero testing that were trying to log into the test. I don't know if this has been mentioned yet, but there was a network setting that we were calling a ping to the client's router, basically their connection, and their router didn't have a port open for that ping, so they would get stuck at the login screen, which was this windmill vista of like a volcano in the background. I think you guys can see it somewhere. And that quickly became referred to as the windmill boss during December. And so, as just a point of levity, I had one of my concept artists take that scene and change the windmill into a boss that had some teeth and a mouth and eyes and fire coming out of the mouth, and throw some alpha testers in front of the windmill, because the common meme was that everyone was getting slayed by the windmill boss.
Awesome.
right.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But I mean, eventually we were able to fix that issue. We saw over 100 people connected at a single point in time on a single dedicated server for a single zone that was 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers, roughly 16 square kilometers, along with 4,000 NPCs. And we were able to achieve a frame rate on the server above 60 FPS. And for those of you who, a lot of people see FPS, they think, this is how good and quickly my screen's moving. But we're not talking client-side FPS. Client-side FPS was always fairly good. It was the server FPS, and that means that when the server's sending out instructions or packets or information to the different clients, such as your position in relation to other players, your position in relation to monsters, whether or not your strike plays server effects or deals damage to a target, the server has to have a FPS that's operating at a roughly, I'd say, with the optimal performance would be above 30 FPS in order for that to appear seamless, so that there's no hiccups. And we were getting above 60 FPS. And with the number of monsters and players present in that alpha test, in these alpha tests that we've been doing since December 15th, we've been really, really satisfied with that performance.
Right. And I know there was some criticism along the line of, have we seen enough progress in the year since this was first seen at PAX West and things of that nature. And I always have to stress to people, networking is not glorious, and it's hard to convey the amount of work that goes into that in videos, because you can't tell. But trust me, when you're in game, you'll feel that network different. You can feel the work that's there, and it's hard to for people to see that. You're like, hey, we're working on a custom network backend, but that's not flashy, that's not, but it's important, and you do feel it when the game is there.
I mean, and not only that, and yes, like from a network perspective, there was a lot of work done from west to east. But from PAX West to PAX East, you have to think, PAX West was a single small, less than probably half a kilometer square area that was confined to one path that moved forward. It didn't have character persistence. It didn't have character progression. It didn't have experience gains. It didn't have drops. It didn't have certain skill mechanics that are present. When we went to PAX West, we were going with our Alpha Zero build. And the Alpha Zero build was this large zone that had probably 25 different creature types, that had quest lines that were developed, that had persistence. You can log out and log back in and everything is saved. That had inventory with different items, a whole bunch of tiers of items that were present. Now, the difficulty and the reason why, some people said this is similar to PAX West, well, the reason is our targeted approach on how to give players at PAX West an experience, or PAX East, or any trade show for that matter, is that we cannot show an MMORPG in 10 minutes. There is a lot more in 10 than what you have time for to show at a trade show. So, showing off our node system and how that develops and collects experience, that's a far more intricate system that will take a lot of time to actually show a node progress from one stage to another, even though we have that in Alpha Zero. So instead, what we want to do is give players an immersion into the world, have a GM guide them through, explaining generally the systems and ideas that sets Ashes of Creation apart from other MMOs, and allow them to participate in a story, right? Because a story is something that people can get invested in. And that's why we choose to do the quest line that players can participate in.
Right.
So, that's our approach to how we show Ashes on a trade show in 10 minutes to people.
Absolutely. And I'm going to let my co-host take over for the normal questions, but I have one more that I know the Ashes of Creation community would hate me if I didn't ask. Nodes Part 3, when is it coming?
How did I know that was going to be this? Okay, so our philosophy on the Nodes series is we really want to show the degree of progress from the last Node video excuse me, to the next Node video that's going to be coming out, Nodes Part 3. Now, while we're in the process of currently making Nodes Part 3, the delay between those two parts is so that as this time has passed, people who come back and take a look at Ashes, or people who are seeing Ashes for the first time, are really seeing a whole new level of development from when the other Nodes videos were done, which was really before our major production started, which was after Kickstarter. So that's the reason for the delay between those two different parts, Part 2 and Part 3. But we are currently working, and my answer is soon, trademark.
You knew that was coming, so
for sure. No.
Yeah.
The Node series are a great series. They get into some design-heavy focus on the node system, which, although the community's heard so much about nodes, there really is so much more to also go in depth about. That's all present, and we do want to really define that feature of the game, because it is our most identifying feature. It's what sets us most apart from any other MMO that's ever come out, and we believe that it will be the system that keeps players invested in the game for a long period of time.
Right. All right, guys. One of you guys take over. I think you guys hammered out which questions you guys are answering or asking.
Yeah, well, I'll pick up with the ones I was going to ask at the panel, but they just didn't fit the venue. So, the first one I got from the guild members was, when will the summer backers get upgrade rights?
That is a great question, and actually, the summer backers can currently get upgrades. Yes, we implemented that actually I believe it was last week when we got back from PAX. And the way that summer backers can do that is if you're logged into your account, and you can check that now if you wanted to. I'm not sure if you're a summer backer, but if you're logged into your account and you go to the store page, you will see in the all section upgrade paths to different packages that from your summer package. And that should be present right now in the.
Oh, awesome!
Okay.
Good answer.
So all of you summer backers who've been looking for an upgrade, you don't have an excuse anymore. Go.
In addition,
right?
In addition, we did update concept for the summer backer add-ons that Kickstarter backers may purchase through their normal dashboard. So Kickstarter backers, you may now see actual representations of those concepts from the summer campaign, and you may purchase them if you wish as add-ons through your dashboard, your account dashboard.
No, see, that'll have to do, as well as upgrading my Kickstarter.
I already did that before they were even done, so I'm sad. Storms, I think you muted yourself there, bud.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Storms.
Yeah.
Oh, the dreaded mute button. While he's working on that, I'll ask the next question here, and he'll just have to jump in. Can you explain to us a little bit more about how castle sieges are going to work? Because I know nodes, this is something that you and I had talked about in the past, where we're expecting nodes as they level up and do their thing, that there's a good chance, and again, this is all player agency, but there's a good chance that nodes may exist, take months to get up to max. And once they're max, they may be maintained for months, if not years. It's all up to the players. Leadership within the node may change, but the node may not be destroyed. But I'm assuming castles are going to be a little bit more of the fluid, back and forth. Can you explain to us a little bit about how you envision those to work?
Yeah, so castles in Ashes of Creation will be on a cycle of siegeability. Meaning that guilds will be able to sign up to either siege or defend a castle. Now, you don't need to be the owner of the castle or in the guilds or in the guild that owns a castle in order to sign up for the defense of the castle. The guild leader that owns the castle will be able to approve guilds that have applied to defend the castle. And then guilds that wish to siege the castle will be required to be of a certain level, meaning that they will have had to progress their guild to a certain point, and they will have to undergo a crafting process that will utilize the masters of each crafting type, gathering, processing, and crafting in the artisanship tree in order to create a declaration flag. Now, when they create that declaration flag, they may, during the period of time right before the siege of the castle, which is 1 week out, the castle's siege rotation will be monthly, once per month. And obviously, everything here is something we're going to be testing. But you may then declare with that declaration flag your intent to siege the castle. And the defender will have a week grace period before that scheduled siege period that they can approve defenders, lay down mercenaries, NPCs, different defensible positions at the castle. Now, another important aspect of castle sieges work is that castle sieges come with 3 dedicated nodes. Castles themselves. Castles themselves come with 3 dedicated nodes. These nodes exist outside of the node system. So they're independent of anything that's happening outside in the world with other nodes, shutting off certain nodes from progressing. Now, these nodes that are dedicated to the castle can only be brought up to the village stage. And they must be brought up through questing by either alliance guilds or the owning guild of the castle. And that questing involves taking caravans and supplies from existing nodes in the world to the dedicated castle node in order during different weeks before the cycled period of siege. Now, what that means is if they manage to get those supplies and complete those quests to level up those nodes, they'll unlock certain services that are handy to the leader of the guild that owns that castle, as well as any allied guilds that may participate in certain functions and services that those nodes could provide for the castle. But more importantly, they'll also boost the defenses of that castle itself. So as those caravans are moving from node to the castle dedicated nodes, rival guilds will want to obviously destroy those caravans and prevent them from leveling up the castle dedicated nodes. If they fail to level up those nodes or complete those quests within the 3 prior weeks before the declaration week, then the castle will be at a disadvantage. It'll be weakened state during the siege period. Now, sieges work in a way that obviously there are going to be different siege weaponry that will grant the attackers the ability to destroy walls, destroy different sections of the castle in order to gain access to the inner keeps area. They'll also be able to destroy the doors that exist to gain access that way. And then it's going to be a matter of capturing waypoints in the castle's architecture. And if you are able to capture those, you'll be diminishing your respawn timer and increasing the respawn timer of the defenders. So defenders also have a counterplay with that that they may attack the siege headquarters of the attacking guilds, diminishing their declaration flags to increase their timers as a reciprocation. There will also be legendary NPCs that will be present as commanders and act as a sort of mini raid boss for raids within the defending or attacking siege participants to try to kill those for added benefits as well as getting certain types of drops that can grant battlefield benefits to the players on either side. So then the ultimate, obviously, objective, the defenders to either survive during the timed period of the siege, which will be probably between an hour and a half. I would say, I think 90 minutes is our first test. And if they do not survive, the attackers will need to reach the inner keep of the castle, and there will be a casting ability that's present on guild leaders of a certain level, and then one other delegated person who can also cast as well, a chosen officer that can cast on behalf of the guild leader. So those two people are capable of casting a long cast, would probably be about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on what waypoint captured will also diminish that cast time. And once they do that, they will have sealed the castle for their ownership.
That actually sounds incredibly fun. I'm really excited.
That does
Sounds good.
Now,
tremendously awesome.
a little bit of a follow-up on this one, and this one can be a really quick answer. Like you said that these castles and the nodes that are independent of the node system, from a lore perspective, are these going to be like the only quote-unquote persistent towns and cities, these castle towns and castles within the world of Vera when we come in? Like, will every server have these castles available so you can always go, oh, here it is, but the nodes outside of that change?
So the castles that will exist 5 steps, and the castles that exist at launch will be occupied by an NPC adversary. These are the primary antagonists in the storyline.
Okay.
And the guilds will have to obviously level up a period of time to level up in order to siege, and it'll be very difficult to take these out of the NPC's hands. So the actual structure of nodes around these castles will not be present as static structures.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, each of the dedicated castle nodes is barren at the start of the castle ownership period. So if I capture a castle and I own that castle for a month before I'm sieged again, that first week, node A, which is a dedicated castle node, will be unbuilt. And I will have 1 week to build that node up through questing, moving caravans and supplies, and having people come and participate in leveling that up. Now, it'll be a hastened level up process. It won't be the same level up to a stage 3 that you might see from a normal node, but it's going to be based on that questing aspect. The second week, I'll need to level up node B, and I can utilize, if I was successful on node A's development, that will aid me in leveling up node B. For that castle. Now, node C is in the 3rd week. And then at that point, the 4th week begins. That's the declaration week. That is when other guilds have the opportunity to lay down their declaration flag, and other guilds have the opportunity to attempt and sign up as a defender of the castle. So they won't be static and present there. They once that process will happen again. And there will be benefits to attracting people to, even if they're not in your guild or alliance, kind of a feudal-like system where you can attract other players who are just independent of this whole politic, and they'll have things to do there, benefits to receive, and there will be a reciprocal relationship between who you can attract, what they do for you, and how that benefits you and them.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, pass it back to you.
Nice,
All right,
nice.
well, Alpha, you're up.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Next question. What role do the 3 houses, like the Thieves Guild, the Craftsman Union, what role do they have aside from augments?
So they have a role in providing assets for gathering, certain tools that make your gathering better. They have a role in recipes, providing blueprints for certain processing infrastructure you may want to build on a freehold. They grant different services depending on who their patron node is. So if you're a part of a town that's been developed and the Scholars Academy has the most amount of work from the players, that becomes a patron organization of the city. So it will grant certain benefits and services to players that they can participate in that relate to their position within the Scholars Academy. Augments are a huge thing that these different societies will offer. They're not going to be a lot of augments within the society's progression. It'll probably be around 3 or 4 that exist per organization. So you'll have to really investigate and study which organization is most beneficial for the path you've chosen with your archetype or whatever role you wish to have in the world. But there's also going to be, you'll get special lures for fishing. You'll have special cosmetics that you can get from a certain society. Maybe you want to change the appearance. You can get specific furniture for your home that you're going to build. You can get specific mount certificates for your breeding. There's a lot of different, the whole idea of these societies is that they are a mechanism for progression that do not have to rely on your level progression. These are different progression paths that players can participate in. If you don't want to leave a node in your gameplay experience and you want to find as much as you can do within that city, these offer those things. Now, some quests might take you outside of the city to, hunt and pursue things, but you could also perfectly be a person that is a merchant and purchases them from other travelers instead of having to go do it yourself. We want to offer players a diverse method of progression, and these systems house those benefits.
Excellent. All right, next question. How does Intrepid plan to make raiding have real weight and lore behind it?
Yes, well, I think probably in our previous games is that raiding really becomes extremely repetitive. It is something that you pretty much have it on your calendar. Okay, at this time, this boss respawns, and we need to be there and make sure we're the first to down it, or, you just log in at this time, our raid's ready to go. We want things to be more fluid, and one of the ways that we make them more fluid is through our triggered event system. As the world is advancing, building up, we've spoken about how bosses will be awoken and come and attack the city and stuff like that. That is one of the methods by which we make these more spontaneous. We make them more accessible to a wider audience. You can be just in the city and not normally be a part of a raid team, but now get to participate in this organic event that's kind of popped up around the city. And if you are not participating, then buildings are going to get destroyed and NPCs are going to die. And now there's a associated with the raid. It's not just how fast can we do it, how well can we get it done, and it's schedule, but oh my God, this thing popped up. If we don't kill it, we're not going to have access to our stables this week, and we can't get our animal husbandry certificates, right? So it's like it's that risk versus reward that gives you a sense of adrenaline. You have to participate as opposed to this monotony of scheduled raidings. That's just one example.
No, that was good.
Very nice.
Thank you. So then I'll jump in. Another question that the guild had was, will the development team be playing Ashes as players, or will they make their appearances like old school, GMs in the game?
The answer to that is both. We will be doing both. You won't know who we are as players.
Steven, I think you're breaking up there just a tad bit.
Whoops. Sorry about
we got
that.
the whole you
How
won't
about
know
now?
who we are as players, but
Oh, okay. How about now?
yep,
Am I good now?
I'm good now.
All right, sorry. We'll be doing both. We'll be doing you won't know who we are as players, but also when we're on our GM.
Cool.
A little bit of both.
All right, awesome. Can you elaborate a bit more on story and quests shaping the world? In a dev diary, it was mentioned that players' choices help drive the world. How does it work with an X amount of players competing in the same quest?
So, I mean, our quest system, from a narrative standpoint, really is respective of two primary arcs. There's going to be the overarching story that relates to the decisions of the community, how the world gets developed, what major storyline events have been accomplished with the downing of world bosses, or the discovery of certain types of relics, or the persistence of certain nodes to a certain time state. And when it achieves that, it unlocks something that the players didn't know existed, and they all get to participate in that. And then there's the individual narrative and how these overarching stories kind of relate to you as a player. Now, when you go out and you do a quest, and that quest gives you, you need to kill the boss at the end of this dungeon. That quest needs to be accessible by all players. They'll be able to participate sometimes as a group or individually. There might even be different directories of the quest that exist for specific races. And even though you're sharing a quest to kill a boss, if you're a human and I'm an elf, I will have a different arc potentially that leads in a different direction than you, even though we took the same quest. And that can relate to kind of who the primary cultural contributor is to a node, unlocking different arcs for cultures that share the primary culture of a node. Not that it locks out content, but it gives a flavor in a different direction so that not everything is so cookie cutter. And the way we achieve that is by obviously, when you create your character has a tag in the back end that demonstrates what culture it is. And when NPCs get populated in a city based on the primary culture contribution to that city's development, those NPCs are going to react differently to different tags on your character. So I come up as an elf in an elven city, it's going to talk to me differently than if I were a human coming up to a quest giver in an elven city. And those quests will include different flavors for the different races by that way.
I'm thinking like Divinity, right?
Right, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
All right, cool.
All right. Tag, you're it.
All right, I'm up again. What are your plans for player-developer communication post-launch? Because one thing that we've noticed actually is, as far as we've currently been experiencing, you guys have had awesome player communication, and we're wondering what are the plans post-launch, and will that persist?
I mean, for me personally, like my whole reason for starting Intrepid was that I wasn't happy how other developments were not engaged with the community and did not to some of the direction that the community was trying to give them. While I understand that there is a creative vision at hand, and that creative vision should not necessarily deviate at the whim of a vocal minority. It is important, however, to take into account what the player base is saying. And the only way to do that is to be connected with people. Mm-hmm. So, you'll see in our development, there are period of times, a couple weeks may come up, 3 weeks might come up, where there is less communication than normal. But generally, our objective is to be as communicative as possible with the community. So, it's going to be a very active development team because also we're self-publishing in North America. We want to make sure that we are there for the community to interact with on a regular basis.
Right. I mean, you guys have already seen that, and I'm going to throw this in here. They've been incredibly interactive, even with us, as a fan podcast of the show. I think this is fourth time, Steven, that we've interviewed and talked to you on the show. I think it's 4 different times so far. So, I mean, you can see their dedication to the community, how active they are. So, I mean, they've already been evident of that so far, which has been really cool.
Another thing to take away from that is that, I understand I understand why some studios may not have this level of open development, because part of open development is the communication process. and being present in different communities such as Dungeon Crawler Network or other content creators that might be out there is an added difficulty because it does take up time. And especially during the development phase of a game, time is something that really just doesn't exist. I mean, I retired when I was 28 years old, only to jump into probably the most time-consuming process of my life, which is building this game. Although it is a great passion, it's something I love to do every single day, walking into that studio and getting to work with these amazing veteran developers. But it is something that is a lot of time, and having to devote time towards the community can be something that's difficult to do. But I would reiterate this. After the development is complete and we start working on expansions and updates, I foresee there is going to be a great more deal of time for myself and a few other peoples to interact with the community more so. So that's something to consider as well.
Oh, cool. So we can schedule you guys in right now. No, I'm just kidding. But no, we really do appreciate you taking the time, like we said earlier, that you're taking the time to talk to us. And we always, of course, love it. So, all right, Alpha, I think you still have some more questions to jump through.
Yep. Let me jump to the next one. So I heard something interesting that was mentioned kind of within the talks of Ashes, and that was players would essentially have the ability to create their own bank and essentially run a business, very similar to how the taverns were described and things like that. So what we're curious of is, can you elaborate on potential tools that people will be able to use in order to make businesses of their own that they come up with, or anything different like that?
Yeah, so it's not specifically, just as clarification, not specifically a bank per se, but different types of businesses, such as a tavern or a auction house, or something that's present in the node. So let's just use the tavern example. If you own a tavern and you could potentially own this business that exists in the city, or you could own it on your freehold. Now, what players can do at this tavern is going to be up to you as you manage this building, right? There's going to be a UI that's present for you to kind of select different services that are present. And that could be in the form of specific quests that can only be taken at your location. It could be, and that quest could require some coin in order to discover this quest. So say, for example, you enter into and there's NPCs chatting in there, and you're walking around, and you might need to bribe the bartender to give you some information, very D&D or Pathfinder feely. That would be a coin that you would collect from players, and they might be able to find either random quest. They might be able to purchase a food that you have selected or achieved, and this is going to be its own progression. So as you start the tavern, the business, you may have only access to the tier 1 service, the tier 1 quests, the tier 1 meals that grant a specific type of buff for a period of time after the player leaves. And then as you exist for a longer period of time, because it's difficult to exist for a period of time in a world that's constantly changing, somebody could siege your node and destroy it, or destroy your freehold because of it. So the longer you exist, the higher level up you come in that business, the more patrons you serve, the faster you'll be able to level up in that business, granting access to new types of recipes for food that you could then potentially even sell to cooking professions that could only gain it from a player-owned business in a certain area, or a specific quest that might only be gathered from a player-owned. So there's a lot of things that we want to incorporate in our tavern, in our business-owned system, that kind of grants players a meaningful existence in the world and rewards them for their persistence, dedication, and survivability.
All right. Yeah, I hadn't actually even thought of taverns and businesses leveling up, but yeah, that's an awesome idea.
Thank you. I like it too. it's always something that I wished, like when I would run, a lot of comes from my experience as a GM playing Dungeons and Dragons campaigns or Pathfinder campaigns, and there's a lot of versatility as a dungeon master to kind of create your own house rules and systems that exist, and let the players explore out those systems because it gets fun, right? And part of what I used to do with large campaigns that would exist is I'd have a kingdom building, side arc that people could do in downtime. So like we'd have our play session one night of the week, but then the rest of the week they would be emailing me what their character's doing during downtime, participating in different businesses or ventures. The side evil campaign that some dude in the party is hiding his alignment is actually some evil guy. There's a lot of things there that I just feel has been left out and is a huge reservoir of play potential that players can experience in graphical render in a graphical D&D campaign, which is what an MMO really should be from a fantasy perspective. Is like it is that graphical representation on a computer where instead of playing with a group, you're playing with thousands of people across the world, and you're experiencing this really living experience.
Right, and I mean, jumping in here, that's over time we've seen that the MMO industry, and I specifically said it that way for a reason, has been dropping the RPG element from that, and we're a massively multiplayer online game. I've seen that acronym thrown around because they don't like the idea of the RPG, and they're taking that out.
And you know what? It's okay for that. It is not necessarily a bad thing for the MMO part of MMORPG to explore different avenues. As countries upgrade their connections to different households and the demographic becomes larger of players who have either the resources to own a console /PC /whatever, and network technology becomes better at accommodating massive players in different game designs. That's all great and good. But the problem is innovation has left the MMORPG aspect. And I think that's what you're saying is they leave out that RPG element and what innovation can exist there. And the reason why they do that is because it is such an investment from different companies to take the risk of creating an MMORPG that they can't really combat these large players in this industry, so they don't try.
Right.
And I think that what Intrepid is doing is trying to illuminate the potential that's present, and provide the players what they should rightfully be receiving.
And I think part of that comes in, we're getting a little meta here, but I mean, part of that also is the changing mindset of players in general, the quick get in, get out kind of gameplay that is so prevalent nowadays. People don't want to invest the time to explore RPG elements. It's like, I don't want to have to develop my character. I just want it there. But I feel like personally that's hurting the genre. I understand there is a time and a place for that type of gameplay, but I feel like that's been hurting the MMORPG genre because they've been trying to accommodate that quick get in, get out gameplay.
Well, I think that when a development is driven by the bottom line, the dollars, that's when it's possible for their direction to shift to how can we appeal to the largest audience possible? Let us incorporate that into our game design. As opposed to Ashes of Creation, accepting the fact that we will not appeal to everyone, and that is okay. There is a sufficient number of players that exist in the MMORPG community to create a successful game that appeals to the RPG players out there. And that's what a lot of our systems are geared towards.
Excellent.
The vision statement that you just made with regards to taking the D&D campaign or Pathfinder campaign and putting it into the MMO, into the computer, the way you stated it was fantastic. That is going to drive the difference home. Is that vision, that empathy behind that? You can just hear it in the way you said it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm a diehard of the traditional. In fact, I was toying with the idea of running my Ashes campaign as a weekly Twitch stream with the developers in the office, and giving people an insight to the story that way. But I'm just so concerned about revealing certain aspects of the lore and spoiling it for people. But it is something I'm still toying with.
I think eventually that'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
You don't want to give away stuff, but absolutely that'd be it. So I'd watch that one.
That might be a fun DVD documentary at the end,
Yeah.
for Super Collector's Edition. Hey, there you go. The thought process behind it. Nice. All right, Alf. I think.
All right. One tack-on question to that, and that is, I got my wife throwing stuff at me. Anyways, I've got, as a tavern owner, will I have the ability to kick people out of my establishment? Or let's just say I don't like Empyrean elves. I think they smell funny. I think they look funny. I don't want them in my store. Can I block them from being in my store, or no?
I would be leaning towards the answer being no.
Gotcha.
And the reason why is because there are plenty of mechanics for you to exercise your dislike of another player, especially through PvP. And we don't want to hard code in divisive systems, such as either excluding movement of a player character into a certain area, such as your tavern, or banning somebody through that method. I think that the ultimate aspect of an MMO is the fact that you are playing with people you would never meet. You're forming relationships with people you would never have an opportunity to form relationships with. You're conquering, cooperating, and there's also conflict. I don't want to hard code into the game the ability to divide, and I think that you can remedy your dislike of a player through the existing conflict system.
Cool.
So I guess that means that if I'm running a node, I can't artificially make all the NPC guards have a negative reaction to all elf characters because I don't like elves.
No, you can't do that. I'm sorry. Again,
Good decision.
the idea behind even nodes is that there is no ownership.
Yeah.
There is really no ownership. This is a location in the world where anybody can come and start a life or declare their citizenship, right? And there's going to be leadership, and that leadership will hold powers that citizens may not hold in order to develop the node and build certain types of buildings. In fact, they can even declare, trade partnerships with different nodes. They can declare war on different nodes. And, that would be a mechanic where guards would then be set to attack citizens of another node if they come within range. But that would be not a specific race per se. It would be the other citizens of that.
Man, I was gonna say,
You need to stop trying the racial wars.
you don't know my dislike of elven races, so therefore, as a leader, I therefore would be pushing policies that may not be popular among the elven kind. That's all I'm saying.
Unbelievable.
I'm telling you. You can blame Skyrim and the Altmer for that. I really hate elves after that game, so it's all the elf hate is ingrained in me now.
Built in.
It's built in.
All right. So in a previous episode, we were looking at the griefing system, how it works, and what we know so far. I had a particular problem with the Sea of Thieves griefing system. So we're questioning, say a player is such a pronounced XP loss that they get down to the XP of a level 1 character. But if they're still at level 50, how do they redeem that if they can't get that experience back up? Or can they?
So we don't have de-leveling. Instead, what we have is experience debt. Now, the more experience debt you accrue, the the greater the detriment to your character. Not to the point where you cannot get out of the debt. Mm-hmm. There will always be a way forward to remove your debt, your experience debt. Now, with regards to griefing per se, you're not going to really. You're not going to see griefing in the game very often, and that's because our flagging system, the corruption mechanics, are based around disincentivizing a griefer or PKer, but still offering the opportunity, should the occasion arise where the benefits outweigh the risk, you have the ability to do so. But corruption, if you gain corruption, which is killing a non-combatant, a player who is not fighting back, basically, if you gain that corruption, your world has changed. It is not going to be a very beneficial place to be, and you have the potential of losing your combat efficacy decreases based on the amount of corruption you accrue. It is a comfortable balance between player agency and griefing, basically removing player agency for other players.
And for some clarification of that, that is what we're referring to as anti-griefing, would be corruption system. That being in the place of, yes, you can, you could kill someone if you want to. And you did say there is a possibility of losing gear as a corrupted player, correct?
Correct. That's yes. If you die as you will lose some material resources, some things you've gathered, materials you may be holding. You will not lose completed items, weapons, and armor, or jewelry, or anything that's an actual item. However, if you are corrupt, meaning you have killed a non-combatant player, a person who hasn't flagged for PvP, who hasn't attacked back, you will gain corruption. When you gain that corruption, you have the potential of losing your completed items, your weapon, your armor, stuff that is very difficult to achieve. And then the other aspect of that is that in order to deter basically players taking alternate characters and saying, this is my PK alt, the more players you kill, the more corruption you gain, the higher your combat efficacy in PvP diminishes. So to the point where you will deal if you are out there and you kill 20 players just for fun, and they're dead, and you've gained that corruption, you will not be able to perform in PvP any longer. You will need to take that character and go work off that corruption. And then additionally, the other aspect of corruption is that if you kill another player who is a non-combatant, and the level disparity between you and that player is great, you will gain a higher amount of corruption from that single kill, to the point where you should not be killing a level 1 character 50. Otherwise, that would be the equivalent of killing 10 level 50 characters, perhaps.
Right. Okay, good. So for all of you guys who listened to episode 40, I think it was, 41, which was our griefing one, there you go. So, Steven, you can listen to that part. There you go. Cool. No, and that's what we were referring to as, the griefing type system. And I like that, because there's sometimes, that was something, I played Ultima Online, right? That was the very first MMO. You could kill someone. Now, obviously, there was full gear drop in that game, but as a corrupted player or as a red player, you could actually lose skill progression in that game if you died. There were negative repercussions to attacking a karmically good player, or performing any kind of quote unquote evil act. But there was always that, do I risk this? Because, and there were ways to redeem yourself. It's like, if I kill the person for whatever reason, I can become good again. I just have to survive long enough to do it.
Right.
And so there really was that little bit of risk versus reward. And sometimes you just got to stab someone when they're really being an awful person. Possibly
well,
me.
part of my experience in playing MMORPGs, I was a a very big fan of a game called Lineage 2.
Mm-hmm.
And Lineage 2 had a very similar system in their flagging system. We've incorporated, obviously, some changes that I think Lineage 2 had issues with. But generally speaking, funny thing, in that game, there was... So it's interesting. Like, probably our most memorable among the MMOs we've played are the stories that are created by players, by other players, by our interaction with them.
Emergent gameplay.
Exactly. So one of the interesting things that happened too was on my server there were three primary alliances that existed. There was one that I was leading. There was another one, the third, and there was a fight that had broken out at one of the popular hunting areas between my party, who were trying to hunt in this area, and one of the leaders' parties of the other alliance. And we called in our friends, who was the third alliance, who took our side. And outside of one of the main cities, there was probably an 8-hour-long fight that existed between about 200 different people, just respawning. Now, in that game, in Lineage 2, when you died, you lost 4% of your level, and you could de-level, and it was a Korean grind fest. Because if you were at max level, the time it took you to level up one level, at 72, I think was the max level, took you about 4 or 5 days. And I was 72 during the fight, and at the end of that 8 hours, I had dropped down to 64. So it was torturous. I'm not advocating for the experience, but I will say that it was one of the most memorable and fun experiences I had at an MMO, having those players just fighting nonstop outside of the city, respawning and running back to fight again. But the system that was in place in Lineage 2 was a similar flagging system, and you didn't often see PKers. I mean, you really didn't, because it was difficult to attain the gear, and there was not usually a risk. There was not usually an opportunity that was higher than the risk associated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've always hated games where you were limited. Like the system said, you cannot attack this player for whatever reason. Like,
right.
Even in real life, if you will, there's crimes and punishment for it. And sometimes it happens, right? We're not going into morality here, but there's nothing limiting you as a person from performing a certain action. We look back at history, we already know sometimes people got sick and tired of the emperor in Rome, with Commodus there. It would really be annoying if there was a system in place that said you can't kill Commodus. Sorry. Even though he's a terrible emperor. So, yeah, I'm glad that we're sticking with that. I love Roman history, so there we go. All right, let's continue with these questions. We only have a couple more left to go, Steven. I don't know what your time frame is, so.
No, that's fine. A couple more is fine.
All right. So it was mentioned that the game will be balanced against group content and not for PvP specifically. What are your thoughts on how something becomes balanced for group content?
I'm sorry, you had broken up there just for a second. What was that? Say one more time.
So one of the questions we have was, it was mentioned that the game will be balanced against group content and not for PvP specifically. What are your thoughts on how something becomes balanced for group content?
Well, we are balancing for group content with regards to synergy between classes. We want the base archetypes to have a role that is beneficial to a diverse group composition. Now, that's not to say we're not balancing for PvP. As a matter of fact, our first phase of Alpha 1 is very, very PvP centric.
I think the question's more of, I'm sorry the way it was worded, but I think it's more of balancing for PvP on a 1-for-1 ratio. Like,
1 versus 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the better way of wording that question.
We don't want to, we're not trying to balance. That is, there will be matchups in 1v1s where one class will be superior to another. And that application should be a rock, paper, scissors dynamic. We want there to be counterplay between the different classes. That's something that's important. We feel it will be beneficial to raid composition, because raids will then not just be able to run a mage ball, because those are the ultimate class in the game at the moment. And when the game changes the meta, that instead what we want is 3 houses in this system where archetypes exist and have a not necessarily decisive, but do have a advantage over their counter classes. So because of that, we don't really 1v1s to that degree. Instead, it's going to be a group-focused balance where, as long as you have the diversity of class present, that's going to be an equal level playing field. It's going to be very dependent on skill and strategy.
Awesome. I know that always becomes an issue in other games, especially that focus on like PvP arenas and whatnot, where you start getting a lot of flack from the vocal minority about, my class sucks in this, it's no longer meta. And you start seeing the game change a lot because the developers start caving to, oh, you're right, rogue backstab is overpowered, let's nerf that. And then it starts losing its application in other areas where a PvP change is now affecting how it's handled in PvP or PvE, vice versa. You can't, when you balance for that 1-to-1, it starts making all the classes feel exactly the same anyway.
And we don't want that. We want a lot of present in those classes. Now, it's important to note, however, that in our secondary class system, what creates that 64 different classes, certain archetypes are capable of moving the gap between their counterpart per se. If I am a tank archetype and a mage is my counter, I can take a mage secondary and kind of bridge the divide slightly, and move my identity that direction ever so slightly. And that can help. So we want, and players can change that secondary class through a process, but can change that secondary class as well. So yeah, that's really our objective.
Cool.
All right. So the last question I have is, will the NDA be lifted for Alpha Phase 1?
There will not be an Alpha 1 NDA. There will not be an Alpha 1 NDA. There will be a test period before Alpha 1 for Alpha 1. It's so funny. There will be an Alpha for the Alpha 1, and that will include the Kickstarter backers at the Braver of Worlds.
Alpha 0.5.
There you go.
Well, I mean, obviously, we do internal testing, we do QA testing, and then eventually we do a soft rollout, and that's our alpha of the alpha. But it won't be too long, and the Braver of Worlds players will have the ability to participate in that very early phase of the Alpha 1, Phase 1. A lot of different phases and pre's and alpha.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, passing Alpha over to you.
All right, real quick. Do you have any plan for any GM run events? Specifically, the one that comes to mind is when they shut down the Final Fantasy XIV servers, they actually had a huge server-wide event where they spawned monsters everywhere, and it was symbolic of the destruction of the world before they brought it up again for A Realm Reborn. And there's been many kind of instances of GM kind of spawned events. Any plans to do that in Ashes?
I know why that's fun, and I have had fun in events similar to that in other games I've played. As a matter of fact, the time when I felt Arcade was best was during Alpha. But at the end of that Alpha, they had GMs, making people giants and their heads big and running around and doing fun things. But I will say that we need to be careful with those types of things, because whenever you inject an outside element to a player-created atmosphere, you have an opportunity to direct the course of events on a server. and it's an unfair direction because as GMs we have we have different appeal than any other player may have on the server. So I don't ever want it to be a situation where if the company and our personnel can stay out of this player created political atmosphere / world that they are directing, I would like that to be the case. Can we do some fun things? Yes. Will we lead a raid against a world boss? No. That's what I think you have to find a comfortable balance.
Got it. Makes sense. Can you provide any more details on the node system as it relates to the benefits that each kind of has, or will that be coming in the part 3 of the node system?
So some of that will be coming later on in different blogs.
Okay. Nice. I like the way you brought that back around to Nodes 3. That was classy. We did not work that out ahead of time, so I'm very proud of him for that one. Awesome. So, well, Steven, thank you so much. I think that's the end of our questions because I see the other ones we have, I guess, aren't being marked, so I don't know if we're asking those, but and that's fine. So thank you so much, Steven. We really appreciate your time. Is there anything that you would like to say to the player base?
Yeah, no, I really want to just, again, I tell you this, but we tell you how much we appreciate at the studios the involvement of not just content creators like yourself, but also the members of Discord, the people on our forums, the evangelists that we have spreading the word for the game. It means so much to my development team personally to see this type of support for really a game that has no pre-existing IP, that has no pre-existing story, that's really only spawned over the past year. It's absolutely incredible, and it is all thanks to the community that we have in wanting to move the genre in expressing their hopes for a game that's not just made by a gamer, but takes into account really what this MMORPG community that's so unique in the gaming genre, what we want out of a game. And hopefully it turns the heads of different publishers and different developers so that we can see more of this community-driven development.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And a little bit of a side, I think we're really starting to see that era of the quote-unquote indie MMOs just due to the fact that there's been so much dissatisfaction with the AAA MMO industry and people wanting to see things different that the big companies and publishers aren't willing to take a risk on. And we really need to see that life being brought back into our genre. Because I know Steven has said this. I know I don't even like playing single-player games. I feel like I'm wasting time. MMOs are like the love of my gaming life. Like they are the things that I tend to put the most amount of effort into because I love the sense of community. I love the sense of a living, breathing world that continues even when I'm not logged in to drive it along. And I'm just so excited for what Ashes is going to, do. And again, Steven, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on. I want to thank my co-host Storms and Alpha Soul as well. You guys did great with the questions. And also for the community for listening to the show and coming back each and every week. We really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And we will see you next time on From the Ashes. See you later.